Wait, this is 2022. I didn't even realize we had a landline. Hello? No, I'm not interested in doing a horror movie trivia night. I've got a show to run. Thank you. No more calls. Bye. In today's episode of Home Media Minefield, I'm going to be looking at the Scream trilogy. Coming up. I'll be right back. I made it. I know you were worried. Never ever say that and expect to come back after the credits. But I'm here, and welcome to Home Media Minefield presents Let's See What's Out There, Livescream, a entertainment podcast and live stream focused on film and television. In tonight's episode, do you like scary movies? We certainly hope so, because we are going to have a mainly spoiler-filled conversation around the Scream franchise. We have been discussing as to how spoilery we should get about the latest film in the franchise, the fifth film, because that only actually came out here in the UK and in the States, I believe, just in the last week. So many of you may not have seen it. So we're just going to have mild spoilers around this. We're certainly not going to tell you who done it or anything like that on today's show. So my name is Keith Isles. I am an independent filmmaker and lifelong enthusiast of movies and TV shows. I love films. I love watching them. I love talking about them. I love making them. I love acting in them whenever I get the chance. So I'm really pleased today to be joined by two returning guests that came on to discuss Halloween with me back in last October. They're both filmmakers as well. First up, from Turtle Canyon Films, we have Clayton Reed. Hey, Al.
Hello. Hey, how are you?
Oh, sorry, I nearly lost you there. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Can we still say that?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess we can. It feels kind of a little late for that. By the way, I've got this mug just for you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Appreciate
it was the one that didn't turn up in time for our Halloween.
Oh, yeah. Great.
So there you go. But you're well though, yeah?
Yeah. Well, been busy back into it after Christmas, which is always a bit of an odd. You have to ease back into things, but it's been like crazy this January so far at work. So yeah, just working and getting through life.
Cool. I'm just checking. Are all the doors and everything to your studio locked behind you?
I have locked everything because there was a security guard that really slammed on the door and made me jump out of my skin a little bit. So yeah, everything's locked. We are safe, and I have my trusty Buck 120 with me already. So.
Oh my God! Right. Okay. So
just in case, you never know.
No repeats of Scream 3 likely to happen there, no?
Well, you never know. The night is young.
Absolutely. Well, we're the contingent from the UK, but we're also joined by our friend from across the pond, filmmaker, and the man who will really tell us if the continuity of the Scream franchise really holds up. Welcome, Josh from Movie Timelines.
Hey,
how you doing?
Doing pretty well. How's everybody doing today? This Sunday, for some the daytime, morning, others evening.
Pretty
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah.
Now, really good to have you back. I watched. I'll give a plug already to one of your videos where you not only go through the Scream 1 to 4 franchise timeline, but you also talk about unanswered questions in the Scream franchise, both of which are are very entertaining indeed. So if you're watching out there and it's your first time, welcome. If you're enjoying this sort of thing, consider giving this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you hit that little bell icon, you get informed as and when we put new content up, which happens quite regularly. If you're watching live, do feel free to put a comment in the live chat. We've already got Robert Ragland is saying, "Yay, Josh from Movie Timeline." So there you go,
Robert.
you've got a fan already tuned into it. So we appreciate you, Robert, for joining us. Thank you.
And real quick, I don't have one of those buck knives there, but I do have this.
Oh wow!
So
all
Ghostface.
right,
Ghostface should not be stopping over here because that's next to my desk at all times, ready to go.
The way to keep them at
no monster's going to catch me unaware.
Away.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, listen. The first thing I'm really curious about, I made sure we didn't really chat too much about this off air. Prior to starting this, because other than just saying about whether we were going to do spoilers. Full spoilers or not, but I'm really keen. I've obviously got my story as to where I came into the Scream franchise and what it sort of says to me. But before I get into that, I'm really interested in hearing from you both on that one. And actually, Al, I'm going to ask you first, simply because I know what a mega fan you are of the Halloween franchise. And obviously, in some respects, Scream takes the mickey out of that somewhat. And I just wondered, sort of how you got into it and what your thoughts are broadly.
I'll try and keep it a little brief, but Scream's actually probably one of the most important horror films to me in a lot of ways, just partly because of my age, I think. So I always liked kind of being scared or scaring people as a kid. I loved like fake blood, and I loved watching things when I was younger that were scary, but like a age appropriate scary. And then 1997, I was visiting my cousins in North Carolina, and this is back in the day. You'd go to Blockbuster and get a video, and I was 97. I'm 12, I guess. And they said, "Oh, did you see Scream?" And yeah. So for Josh and anyone else watching, it's a lot harder for people younger than 18 to see an adult film in the cinema here. Like, you can't just go with a parent. You do have to be 18. So it wasn't even something I'd ever heard of. And they rented it on video. We watched it like as a family that night. And I was like, I'd never seen anything so terrifying and like so violent and graphic. I'd seen like, in the early 90s, there were a bunch of really, really terrible movies out. They were just like, horror was in such a bad place. I remember seeing films like Ticks. I don't know if you remember that, like monster movie. Yeah. And they were like gross,
like
but
baby Seth Green.
Little baby Seth Green, yeah. But yeah, like I remember stuff like Ticks and seeing that as a kid and being like, well, this is like, I feel like this is too old for me, but at the same time, this is kind of stupid. I'm not frightened of it. It's just funny. But Scream was like genuine. I was so afraid, but at the same time, like, I think this is what we like about horror. That feeling of being like terrified, but kind of combating it and getting through it is like, oh my God, this. And so then you kind of, for me anyway, then I was like, I love this so much. And my cousin who we watched it with, who's like my parents' age, is my parents' cousin, effectively. He was like, afterwards, he's like, oh, did you get all the references to like Halloween and Friday the 13th and all of that? And they were films that I'd heard of, but didn't really know much about.
Okay.
So in a weird way, I came from it the wrong way around. Being a kid in the 90s, it was like,
yeah.
But then once he'd said that, and then he was like, and then I think I watched it like 2 more times at their house before they returned it. And by the time I'd left that holiday, I'd gone to the mall and bought the costume, and I was like, I'm in now. This is my thing now. And then by the time I got home, I was like, right, I've got to find all these movies out, get Halloween, get Friday the 13th, find out what it's all about, and learn about these references. So yeah, it really kind of, in a backwards way, sparked me to go and like develop this love for all the classics, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going that you've actually answered the next question I was going to ask you, because I was curious when you were given this backstory here as to whether you saw Scream before you saw the other
Yeah.
slashers that it references. So that's interesting. What about you, Josh? What was your kind of entry point and your sort of feelings of the franchise generally?
Oh, well, I mean, I saw the first one in the theater. I was that was the mid '90s, were when I was kind of really, really into horror and very much into the movie theaters. I was an adult at the time, and Scream had a lot of hype. I mean, it was pretty hyped up. And when I went to go see it in a movie theater, I didn't know what I was really expecting. I was expecting kind of a big budgety horror movie. And Al, you're right. People don't remember how terrible the '90s were for horror. I mean, it was
terrible.
It was a wasteland.
Mm.
And honestly, I will say that after Scream, it still kind of remained a wasteland, partially because of Scream.
Yeah.
But Scream, to me, was this big shining beacon of light, because it was for how opposed I was to what happened after Scream and all the Scream imitators. The original Scream, I think, is very, very well done. It's a great movie. It's a great murder mystery. It's told really well. And I said this on my dead last episode, which is that I don't think it's really, because it's known now, a lot of people don't understand the impact of going to the theater and seeing Drew Barrymore, who you thought was going to be the lead, killed off in the opening 10 minutes. You're like, wait, what? Because that didn't get spoiled for a while. So people were going to the theaters to seeing it, and they were shocked. I mean, we were all shocked when the star of the movie's dead. It was like our Psycho in a way. So
no, that's cool. Oh, by the way, somebody has just put here, literate idiot, I like that, has put, can't watch the whole stream because of possible spoilers for part 5, but just wanted to say hi, just to let you know. Thanks for that comment, but we're not going to completely spoil part 5. We've decided we are going to touch on it and talk a little bit about it, but we're not going to go into the whodunit aspect or ruin any sort of major spoilers. So I don't know. I understand if you want to come back and watch us later, but I just thought I'd put that out there. So but thank you for the comment.
It's tricky, that, because I think even with this franchise, more than anything, even like what characters might be in this one, I'm nervous to even mention. I'm like,
well, yeah. I mean, we will talk about legacy characters, but we won't necessarily go into anybody's fates or anything like that, or definitely not the murder mystery part of it, for sure. I think I hate aging myself, but I think I'm a little older than both of you guys, I think. So for me, when I was a kid, like a child, my parents were pretty cool and they let me watch stuff I shouldn't watch. So I watched kind of the Halloween films on VHS, when I was pretty young. And then by the time the sort of later Nightmare on Elm Street films came out, I was at the sort of age where I could go and see some of those at the cinema. But again, not the early ones, the later ones that weren't as good, obviously. But I sort of, and then obviously with Scream, it was really weird for me because at that point I was living in the States and I was at film school. So weirdly, I almost felt like the characters in Scream, because my life was very much, particularly in part 2, where they're talking about that they're in movie class and they're talking about, sequels and which one's the best. And they're quoting James Cameron and, Aliens and Terminator and all of that sort of stuff. And The Godfather. And it was weird because those were literally the kind of conversations I'd have with my classmates and stuff. So when I went to see the film, it was kind of, I found that quite cool because I was kind of in that sort of living in America, going to college, thing. So, and around the sort of, certainly the ages of the actors in the film. So it was quite interesting from that point of view. But one of the things I think if we're going to break this franchise down and talk about it, I think there's something really important that goes beyond the slasher genre. And obviously, as we've said, this is not only a slasher; it's kind of a slasher meets a whodunit meets a sort of high school drama, isn't it? It's those sort of three things combined very well. But what I think is quite interesting is we live in a time now where everything is about being meta. Yeah, I mean, you've only got to like look at the latest Matrix film, for example. It's all about, you know, being self-referential and meta and all of this sort of thing. And when you think about it, this film or this franchise was actually so ahead of its time from that point of view. And I think if we go back to Wes Craven, I think a lot of it is owed to a film that I really enjoyed, which was Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which would be, somebody will tell me what number that was. Is that the sixth or seventh in the and I think it was a sort of early 90s that came out ish. And you know, it was
94,
kind of, it's kind of I think it was almost like Wes Craven, or to me, it was almost like Wes Craven's dry run for Scream. I don't know. Do you guys concur with that? Or
yeah, it was definitely that aspect. But what's funny is, I'll bring this up real quick, and there's a slight story attached to it. But Scream, to me, that the whole meta thing, the first time I had ever encountered it, because you know, we all grew up watching horror movies, and you watch movies and you're just like, why don't these people know what's going on? Don't they watch horror movies? There was a movie from early 90s, I think 90 or 91, somewhere in there, called There's Nothing Out There.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a movie about a bunch of people who go out to a cabin in the woods and they get like picked off by a killer that ends up being an alien. But one of the characters in that movie was a horror movie fan, and all he kept talking about the whole movie was just like, I'm not going down there. What, you don't watch horror movies? And it was just like, he knew the rules, and he talked about like, well, if we're going to survive, you can't do that, because that's the way to get killed off in a horror movie. And that was the first time I had ever seen that. And I thought that was a pretty amazing. And a quick side story. I do a horror trivia night here in LA with a big group of horror fans and everything.
Okay.
And I'm on a team of guys, and there's like 6 of us. And I was brought in, and I don't know the guys too well. I know like 1 or 2 of them really well, but the other ones I don't know. And we're sitting there talking about Scream and meta, and I start going off. I'm like, yeah, but you know, that really started with this movie called There's Nothing Out There. And they all just started staring at me funny. Like, and I'm like, well, what? They're just like, that's Rolf's movie. And there the director was in my trivia group.
Okay. Wow. Oh, interesting.
The director's name is Rolf Kavinsky. He is Kanevsky, and he's part of my trivia group. And he's done a whole bunch of other movies after that, but that was his movie. So,
wow,
very fun.
I love that movie.
But that was my first encounter with movies where somebody would like knows that they're in a horror movie. So Scream was like, I feel like that was a thing that had started, the cracks had started to kind of show in horror movies. And yes, New Nightmare was a great example of that. And Scream was it, you know, that the culmination of all of that.
Yeah. That's why I always found like the scary movies, which of course was the original script title for Scream, wasn't it? I always found that a little bit weird, actually, because I thought, so you're making a parody of something that's kind of a parody anyway.
Yeah. It's like they already made the parody. You don't need to spoof that. Exactly. It's funny that, because I think about that and how in the way that people think of like Halloween as being this, like, that was the first American slasher, but we all know really there were like, it was happening for 5 years or so, and then like John Carpenter went, I've distilled it into what's going to work for a mass audience. I think Scream kind of did that. You did have these few coming before it, kind of peppering that kind of meta, we know we're in a movie thing, and then Scream, I think it's probably down to Kevin Williamson just going, right, okay, I need to get all of the ingredients into this pot and like get the casting right, and all of that just came together, and it's like, that's why it feels like, oh, this is the one that was first, even though technically people were kind of doing it already. And And in a way, Halloween was kind of a very similar thing. I also wonder whether that culture, just being on the home media minefield, train as we were, but like that culture, I wonder of there being these characters that you could relate to as being like super horror movie fans, couldn't really happen before like late 80s, early 90s anyway, because there wasn't home media. So it was much harder to be like an obsessive fan over a thing that you couldn't see that often.
Right.
Yeah.
And even in the 80s, like I was watching a documentary the other day about video nasties here, and like again, I'm slightly younger, Keith, but I'm not saying you're old. But like so I understand it, VHS in the early 80s was like £50 for a videotape, right? So it wasn't like kids could just go and buy a video and just watch it over and over again, Whereas by the time like I was a kid, that's what I was doing. I was like, that's what I'd spend pocket money on, and
I mean, okay, I'm not that old. The home media, the Betamax VHS war and all that had happened before.
Of course, yeah.
I actually consider myself quite lucky actually to have grown up in that home video era, because we had a VCR in the home, from when I was really young, and we used to rent movies, we used to record things on other channels, and all this sort of thing, and I got access to a lot of that. And then there was the price of the actual home media by the time I was an adolescent or whatever had become much more affordable. You could buy Raiders of the Lost Ark. That was, I think, the first sell-through VHS tape in the UK. And I know I'm going slightly off track here, Mr. Home Media Minefield, but you could buy that for like £20 here in the UK. So, $30 or whatever that translates to. So, But
let's not forget the other aspect that helped create the obsessive horror fan, which was the internet. Which we'll
come to. Yeah, no, definitely.
Well, it's gone even further now. I mean, but I suppose
too far.
I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this. Like, frankly,
there is a point I want to make about that later.
Yeah,
I don't want to. We've got a few comments, so I don't want to ignore the people just making some comments here. So Robert's come back with a very good observation that Scream is basically a modern day Psycho switcheroo, for Drew Barrymore being like the Janet Leigh character in actually he corrects himself there, Janet Leigh, there you go. Character. Tom Wade is saying, so we're not going to reveal that the killer in 5 is Gene Simmons. Damn it,
Tom, you've ruined it, man.
I ruined the whole thing. But he didn't reveal that it's actually Ace Frehley wearing a Paul Stanley mask, wearing a Gene Simmons mask over top of it. It's a whole triple reveal. It's really weird.
Yeah, I felt like it went off piece there, really.
Elizabeth Gardineri. I've only watched. Sorry if I mispronounced that, by the way. I've only watched Scream in the last year, and you're right. I couldn't imagine what it was like going and seeing Drew Barrymore die. But I remember movies in the 90s and watching Scream. It felt like a movie made now. Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that. What else have we got here? Sorry, I'm just seeing if anything relates to what we've. Mark Davies here. Sorry, Mark Davies. Scream 1 and 2 were the first slashers I remember watching on VHS with my brother one evening when our parents went out, so they definitely hold a special place for me. By the way, the reason I'm reading these as well is this does go out as a podcast also, so I don't want to. I know it's visual medium, but I don't want to. I don't want to leave anyone out. An
interesting note about that of what Mark just said there is I do want to point out that yes, that Scream was one of those early big budget, big name slasher movies. Because that did have quite a few names attached to it, and a lot of people went on to bigger fame after that. But yeah, I mean, before that, horror had kind of been in a niche for a while, for a very long time. So it was one of the first like event horror franchises. Because I mean, when Scream 2 and 3 came out, it was a big deal in the theater. I mean, it was a huge event to go see the Scream movie.
Yeah.
Well, also that it opened at Christmas, which is like, it's sort of a really weird thing. But the fact that it worked it must have had something to do with like, oh, okay, we've got a formula here for something like that.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, that when you think back on it now, it's like. But then, having said that, I don't know there, but like in England, Keith, do you remember how, like Christmas Eve, they would always put on like a ghost story or horror movie on?
Oh yeah.
On TV.
Yeah. Like
there was an odd
thing or something.
Yeah, there was an odd thing here where it was like Christmas Eve is time to watch a scary movie, which was so kind of, it's weird that they kind of tapped into that as well with the big release of that.
Well, also Halloween, the season rather than the films and franchise, wasn't such a big thing in the UK until sort of the late 80s, I guess, or whatever. Trek Goddess has said you could be an obsessive Star Trek fan in the 1970s and 80s. No internet or home media needed. Just mailing each other fan fiction. Oh, well, there you go. So, the original ghost story is A Christmas Carol. That's right. Pointed out there. So, yeah, absolutely. So, one thing...
real quick, because we got this slide up here. What is that logo up on the top there for the Scream 5?
Right. Well, here's the thing. I was going to ask you guys about this. So, obviously, we've got... And again, it could be referencing today's movies, if you like, Halloween being the prime example. So this new 2020 film is called Scream, even though it's the 5th film in the franchise. They've just called it Scream 2022, right? Or just Scream. But I was I found that image online because obviously with Scream 4, it was Scree 4M, wasn't it? Quite clever. And I was surprised they didn't do 5 Cream.
I'm not interested in seeing 5 Cream.
It's like Five Guys, but it's
5 Cream sounds like an entirely different movie.
Yeah.
For an entirely different audience.
That wouldn't be good. No, but I mean, again, commenting on sort of, because this film does, I think, comment a lot on movie, like the originals did. It commented on franchises and movie fandom and all of that sort of thing within the frame of when those films were set. But likewise, I mean, this deals with, legacy sequels and toxic fandom and requels and all of this sort of thing, this kind of reboot, requel. It's funny, I always used to call, when Star Trek 2009 and the Planet of the Apes films, I used to call those pre-boots because they were like prequel reboots. But we've got this requel that they actually say in the film, right?
and they say it like it's a very common term. And I have to say that this movie is probably one of the first times I've ever heard the phrase requel, but in the movie they're talking about it as if it's like this common thing, requels. Come on, everybody knows what requels are. It's like,
I think I first heard the producer Gail Ann Hurd use that term for the Incredible Hulk, the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk, because they said, even though it was kind of ignoring the film that had come like 5 years earlier, the one starring Eric Bana, the Ang Lee film. Yeah. They said it was kind of a reboot sequel because he started off in South America, didn't he? Which was where he ended up in the Eric Bana film. So I have heard the term used.
I could see it for that. Yeah, I could see it for that. I will say that the new Scream movie is in no way, shape, or form a requel. Because it you assume from that it's something that could be a remake or it could also be a sequel, and that Hulk movie is a great example of that, because if you want to pretend as if it's a sequel to the first one, whatever, you can, or you can just have it be a reboot, whatever. This Scream 5 is just a sequel. I mean, it's just Scream 5. There's nothing else about it.
As your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete has put in the thing here. I first heard Halloween 2018 referred to as a requel, and I would think that would be a really great example of a requel, because it is a sequel to the original film, but it ignores everything else. So it's a franchise reboot, isn't it?
It kind of makes it almost a remake of Halloween 2 because it's the second Halloween film.
Yes.
Reboot.
Although,
so, yeah.
I can see it being a fusing of reboot and sequel.
Yeah.
They're like they're sort of rebooting the series with a sequel, but they're only rebooting part of it. So I guess that's what is. And again, something that does not apply to Scream 5. So,
well, funny enough, I don't want to get too off topic, but I was just recently watching Halloween Kills again because I'm about to do the home media review of it for this week.
Why would you do that to yourself?
Well, there you go. But interestingly, when they introduce security guard Brackett, who used to be Sheriff Brackett, and they have kind of flashbacks to who he was, one of the shots they use is actually from Halloween 2 when he identifies Annie's body. So does that mean parts of Halloween 2 are canon? Don't know.
Yeah.
My mess.
I thought so. I liked that though. That was
and also Mark Davis
Yeah,
but Halloween H2O would be one as well, right? And
yes.
I think yes. Yeah.
That's a requel, yeah. Definitely.
Somebody's also asked, friendly neighborhood Uncle Peter said, why call it Scream and not Scream 5? I don't get that. I
have a
think
hypothesis.
That's a bit of a comment on Halloween. Do you? Yeah,
I have a hypothesis that it's a very cynical reason that Halloween 2018 made an awful lot of money and studios don't really have any imagination. So they go, that made money because it's called the same as the original, therefore that's what we're going to do with horror films now, because we've had Candyman, we've got a Scream, we had a Friday the 13th in 2009. I'm sure there's others coming. They're just going to keep doing this now, I think, because studios are just like, just call it the same as the original, it'll be fine. I think it's that probably.
There's certain things I think that works for, because I will say the new Candyman is one that I'm fine with them doing it for, because again, you can watch the new Candyman without having seen the original, and you're fine. I mean, it feels like its own thing. I mean, it's definitely a sequel, but it also is its own thing. But again, same thing. Scream 5, if you went in, if they were trying to treat this as, okay, this is sort of a reboot, and like, if this is your first Scream movie, then it could be your first Scream movie. That's fine. But it can't be, because you kind of have to have seen the previous movies to jump into Scream 5. I mean, it doesn't make as much sense.
Agreed.
And I think, and one of the things I really love about it is kind of that. And a friend of mine was going to see it, and I was like, when was the last time you watched the other 4? Because really, like, try and watch them all, because you're going to get more out of it the more you know the other 4. Whereas, something like Candyman, it's like, oh, that's cool. That I remember that from the original, but you don't need to like have an inside knowledge of every Candyman movie to watch.
No, I agree. I agree. When I went to see Candyman last year, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I didn't actually revisit the original because I knew it quite well anyway. But for Scream, because I was doing the home media review as well, I watched all 4 before going. But Tom Wade has put, remember the Thing prequel was called The Thing. Absolutely.
And also keep in mind that is another example, because that is a great example, because don't forget, when that came out, no one knew it was a prequel. They billed that as a remake, and it wasn't until you were in the theater and you saw things play out, and it gets to that end, and you're like, this is a prequel. Oh my god! Like we didn't know it was a sequel.
That's true.
That was fun. Yeah.
That's true, and I did like the way they did that, even though people don't like that movie. I get it, but Robert has put, we got to be careful, Josh, because you've now said Candyman twice. So,
but does looking at a computer screen count as a mirror, though?
I don't know.
Well, if you can see yourself, is it the modern mirror?
That's true.
I'm not going to say it again.
I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. I've done it several times, and I'll do it again.
Let's get back to Scream. So, just a quick sort of look at. I mean, we've talked about a lot of this already. So, credits wise. the late great Wes Craven, who we all miss. I know I do. It would have been so cool if he'd been doing this film, because obviously there was some continuity with directors as well as in-universe continuity, in the fact that he he directed the 4 films, but sadly wasn't around to do this one. But again, I'm a big fan of Wes, because I love the Nightmare on Elm Street films I grew up with as a kid. Those were kind of my slashers, sort of, along with Halloween, because for me, I sort of saw them concurrently, even though Halloween came first. So very important. Kevin Williamson, we've already credited as well as being the writer of the first 4 movies. I think there was another writer involved in one of them, I believe, but
Aaron Kruger did the third one.
Aaron Kruger, that's right. Yeah. Yes, was it 3?
Talk about that one.
Was it 3? I think it was
3. Yeah,
it was 3.
Yeah, because Kevin Williamson was busy on something else, but they used an outline that he provided. So, but lesser known, I guess, are the directors of this Scream, which is Matt Bettinelli Olin and Tyler Gillett, who I know them from, I was at Fright Fest a few years back, and I saw a very entertaining film that I knew absolutely nothing about going in, called Ready or Not. I don't know whether you guys have seen that.
Yeah.
It's well worth a view, and these guys are clearly fans of the franchise, and I think that sort of shows. And then obviously the writers, James Vanderbilt, who's got massive credits to his name, both good films and bad films in his huge filmography. And then Guy Buzick, who again worked with the directors on Ready or Not, and I believe did some work on the TV show Castle Rock as well. So I always like to credit the creatives behind these things, because I think that's important. But did you guys see Ready or Not?
Yeah, I it's funny. I've seen it a few times. I remember seeing it in the cinema and kind of enjoying a lot of it, and then not being overwhelmingly pleased with how it ended for some reason. And I've watched it again since, and I've been like, oh no, it's fine. But I remember when I read that those two were going to make the 5th Scream, I was definitely nervous, because I was like, I'm not sure how much I liked their movie, so let's see. I wanted to be in very safe hands, and it was interesting. But
I'm with you on that, because I thought that Ready or Not was very marvelously crafted. I thought that everything that they did going into it was top notch. The set direction, the costumes, the acting was all really good. Everything was really, really, really well crafted, but the script was kind of medium. The script felt a little bit typical. I kind of wanted to see that main character girl do a little bit more. I wanted it to almost be sort of like You're Next, where she was just more capable.
It felt very
expected.
That's quite a good comparison. Yes.
Yeah. You're Next, Get Out. It's in that kind of realm, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I kept having a beef that that character, were it not for one family member that just couldn't make up his mind if he wanted to be bad or not, she would have died 3 times. Just when the third time of that guy being like, I could kill you, but I'm gonna save you. When the third one of those happens, I was just like, okay, come on, can she just win? Just let her win. But I just would have liked to have seen her kind of overcome a little bit more. A lot of the main characters' wins in that happen because the family's stupid, instead of that character being capable, and that's what I wanted to see. So
I get it. Mark Davis has said here that Davies, sorry, I keep pronouncing that incorrectly. Ready or Not was fantastic. Keep telling my wife she'd enjoy it, even though she isn't a massive horror fan. And
it's fun. I mean, it's beautiful and it's fun.
Yeah. And friendly neighborhood Uncle Peter said, Ready or Not is one of those movies that I don't like as much as I should, because I hate this kid in it, just like the Babadook, which of course is one of those one of those films referenced, isn't it?
Mm.
So okay, well, let's before we, because as I said, we're not going to go into massive spoilery things about the new film, but we are going to obviously talk broad strokes on it. But before we do, if we just kind of, start with our main cast, if you like, of our legacy, because it's quite interesting what we would call now our legacy characters, which really makes me feel old.
When I hear all of us, surely.
But we've got obviously Nev Campbell as Sidney Prescott, Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers, and David Arquette as Dewey Riley, who are the the main. Obviously this is a big ensemble. These films are an ensemble, but these are the sort of three anchors that have been through everything, isn't it, really? So
and I was really surprised that they killed off all three of them off screen
in the first 2 minutes.
They didn't even do it on camera. It was just like just like somebody walked in and said they're all dead now, and then that was surprising.
And everyone was like, "Great, move on." Yeah,
you got to go, Josh. No, that's no, I mean it's great. They didn't come back for just cameos, did they?
No, I myself would have preferred to see them. I guess I would have liked a little bit more meat. I will say that at least one of the characters had some nice meat and depth to what they did. But the other two didn't really get as much development. Like there was less reason for two of them to be in there than there was the third. So I guess I would have liked to have seen that explored a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. Just looking again, Elizabeth has said here, I hate in an age that understands we have Google, you would name two movies the same thing. Are they intentionally taking advantage of search results? That's kind of the point you were making out, right?
Well, yeah, it's that. It just feels very much like someone at a studio went, that seems to have worked for them, we'll just do the same thing. And I think that's even, again, it's not a spoiler, but that's even commented on in the new film. That the idea of naming something without a number is kind of a ridiculous notion, which makes me think it wasn't the intention of these filmmakers to do that. That's another reason I feel like they went, okay, they're gonna, because there was a long time when the whole world knew this film was getting made, but no one knew where they were going to go with the title, and then it was like, guess what? It's going to be called Scream, and you're like, really? Like all the other ones? Okay, good.
I think it's quite funny because it's where you look at the original Scream poked fun at the exploitative nature of the slasher film, right, and the tropes that came with it, and obviously subverted most of that stuff, which was one of the things that was so clever about it. But likewise, I love the fact that this, not only is self-referential about things like the title, but the fact that it kind of pokes fun at elevated and post-horror and all of that sort of thing as well. And again, that's not really a spoiler, it's not a major spoiler, but I do kind of like the fact that they that they have a poke at that as well.
Yeah, although I will say, mark me down as one of the guys that would have preferred to have seen less of the meta stuff in this one. I feel as if the Scream series kind of just smashed that into the ground a little bit, and the motivations of things like that, of the killers and such in each of the movies seems to revolve around the same thing. And I would have liked to have seen a little variation here. Of the killer not trying to recreate a movie, just because I felt as if we had already seen that like 4 times. Can we see something different? That's one of the things I would have liked to have changed. Like when they went into the whole rant in this one about like, oh, he's trying to do a requel and this is what he wants to do and he's following these rules, and I don't want to see that. Like that just makes me cringe a little bit. So
yeah, Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
I
So,
understand your point, but I do disagree because, of
okay,
course, that's why we're here.
that's,
But
that's why I have you two on together.
of course, yeah.
Great.
Because I feel like that is, to me, I think there's enough difference for each of the sort of that stuff and the, not the motives, but the reasons that people are thinking about this stuff. Without saying any spoilers, I'm being so careful. But to me, it was like, that is what a Scream movie needs to be. And I think if it wasn't in there, it wouldn't feel like a Scream film. And I think in a way you'd be like, oh, we've lost that thing of it. Because that is so... Because it's like, sometimes you feel like, oh, has this been done... Has this been overcooked in some of them? But when you look back at the original, it's like every line is a self-referential line as well. It's just that then it feels so unique, and now it's like it's been built upon. But I feel like if it wasn't in there, it would be like, well, this could be another franchise. It feels very Scream to make sure that, you know.
And I guess I would have been fine with them including some of the meta context, but I just wish that they had done it in a different way than I already seen it before. My complaint is they're giving me the same thing. I felt this way about Scream 4, and I feel this way about Scream 5. Although I enjoyed Scream 5, I thought Scream 5 was pretty decent. But here's my thing. You're bringing this franchise out of the mothballs. It's been sitting there for 10 years, right? In my mind, you're bringing it back because you've got something new that you want to say. You have something to say, so you're bringing this back. And then when you just watch it and you go, oh, it's just another Scream movie. It just feels very weird. It feels like, what was it about this one that was so urgent for them to be like, okay, it's like 10 years later, it's time to bring it out. And then it didn't really give me anything that I didn't feel as if there was anything that was that important for them to be like, let's pull this out.
Fair enough. Calvin Allen has said here that seeing this so close to the new Matrix really did give me meta reference fatigue. And yeah, I mean, it is definitely a thing at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. I saw a like a meme a while ago, which really hit hard, but does make sense, that kind of like referencing this whole constant nostalgia that we live in as a culture. And it was, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was just basically like, the reason that we're all so obsessed with nostalgia is that that's being a child was the last time you remember being happy. And you're like, oh my God.
True. It's true.
Pretty rough. But I think especially when you've got like so much shit going on in the world, the climate, the COVIDs, all of this stuff, and then you're just like, it's so easy to just look back on a time when you were a child and you didn't have any responsibility and go, that's when everything was fun. And of course it wasn't really. Like, the world, it was never fun. Everything's always been difficult and not difficult. But like, it's whatever age the kind of current audience is, when you look back at as something that was your childhood. And currently I think we're going through that as a 90s period. It's like, well, yeah, because that was fun. I was a child. Nothing mattered.
Yeah,
well,
no, I know.
Well, and not to go off on a slight sidebar here, but I totally agree with that. And like, one of the things that gives me the biggest like chills up my spine when people say it, and I just go, I want to explode into a rant, is when someone says to me, they just don't make scary movies like they did when we were younger.
Yeah.
They don't make scary movies the way they did anymore. And like, it always makes me go, no, they do. You're just not a little kid anymore, so you're not scared.
Yeah.
Like I have a 5-year-old, and like, Peter Pan is scary, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's things that happen that are scary, and when you watch movies now, you're not afraid of a monster that is like rising up out of the ocean. You're afraid of like paying rent. You're afraid of having to go to the hospital and getting that that bill, which you guys don't have to worry about. We do. Those are the things that like keep you up at night. You're not afraid of Freddy. You're afraid of the only Freddy you're afraid of is the guy down the road that is like, I don't know, he's gonna steal your car or something like that. That's who you're afraid of.
Yeah.
So it's that's the weird thing. It's just that I think that we hold on to those things from when we're younger because we remember how they made us feel when we were younger. And we want that back.
Yeah.
Well, like I said at the beginning, you know, I've loved movies all my life, and it is because of, you know, how it made me feel as a kid, definitely. So Cool Fire Newt has put here, I just want the next one to be called Still Screaming, which, that would be really good.
They did make a documentary about the first 3 that's called that, but considering we could just call everything the same thing over and over again, I think it's a good call, really. Let's do it.
They can go a little bit weird and call it Scream and Scream Again.
Yeah. I was just gonna say. Yeah.
Well, here's
another great movie.
So I think we're all agreed then on the fact that the original, the 1996 Wes Craven Scream, the original film, we all think is fantastic and, you know, redefined, if you like, the genre, you know, did something different with it, and gave us something new and entertaining. Where were you guys in terms of when Scream 2 came out, which was, even though it's set 2 years later in the movie timeline, it did actually come out the following year, didn't it? Because of the success they went into, and because Kevin Williamson had already given a story idea, that they kind of went straight into it.
Which the new movie messes up, by the way. The new movie messes up the timeline, damn it.
We'll get to that then. That's good.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I have a question about that. Yeah.
It's about somebody's age, I think. Maybe.
Yes.
But anyway,
23, 25, 23.
Well, they say no. They say that it has been 25 years since the murder, since the murders at the first murders. They say it's been 25 years to the day. A reporter says it's been 25 years to the day. Which, based upon the movie, the movie set in 2021. Was so they're saying that the original happened in 1996, which is kind of difficult because part 2 definitely takes place in 1997, but then they also say it's 2 years. Right. They also say it's 2 years after, which would have put the first one in 1995.
At what point do they say?
So like mine, Josh. Your brain is so like mine because I drive my friends nuts with that sort of stuff. But sorry, Al, you were saying.
At what point in the timelines does someone say that Scream 2 happens 2 years after Scream, though?
It's at a point where Gail is talking to it's like Gail and Sydney are talking or whatever like that, and she says something about like in the past 2 years or something like that. And
you see a calendar, don't you, that says 97?
In the very beginning of the movie, at the movie theater, when they're at the movie theater, it says very big and bold the exact date up on it. It says it's 1997.
So are we assuming that Scream is meant to take place in 95 for that reason then?
Yeah, because and here I can actually let's see, I could actually
it's release date versus
I mean, I know why they've done it. If they'd have said 26 years, it just would have been annoying.
Try dealing with the Terminator franchise. That'll drive you mad.
My God,
sure.
Here we go. So I have the blah 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 blah. I have notes here on my old thing. Gail then asks Sydney to comment on the last 2 years. When she's reporting, she asked her to comment on the past 2 years since the killings. So
well, I think there's a mistake just in that. Then I think that line is the issue more than anything. That we shouldn't get too deep into this, but my feeling is, we're meant to assume that the characters in Scream are seniors in high school, right? And I feel fairly confident that Sydney is in her first year at college because, like, she's still considering sororities and, like, it definitely feels like this is the first year rather than a second year. So that would suggest that it is 1 year, but it's Gail maybe Gail was
But
just
don't forget, Gail
suffering.
had to have time to write the book and for the book to get optioned and adapted, and then the Robert Rodriguez's Stab movie made. Because I don't know whether you know Easter egg there. Robert Rodriguez actually
2 years makes sense, but you know.
Well, yeah. Well, don't forget the movie they're going to see at the theaters is Stab 2, is it not? Or am I wrong?
No, it's the first one. Yeah.
Okay.
That's always like, as someone who's like really obsessively completist, I want to know like who's in Stab 2. I want to see Stab 2 because we see Stab, we see a bunch of Stab 3, and then in Scream 4 we don't see anything of 4, but we see 5, the beginning of 5, 6, and then 7, and then who knows what happens after that. I'm not saying.
Okay, we'll put it this way. I mean, when it comes to continuity, there's all sorts of continuity, and obviously there's in-universe and timeline and all of this. But I've also got a bit of a nitpick about production continuity, right? And that goes right the way down to things like music, right? And here's the thing. This is where, unfortunately, when I was at film school, which was the same time as, Scream, this was pre. You didn't really have IMDb or Wikipedia in the way that you've got those sort of things today, right? And one of the reasons I do this stream is because I can tell you now that if YouTube had existed back then, and we had broadband speeds that we've got now, and cameras to this type of quality, web cameras, me and my friends at film school would absolutely have done this sort of thing, because we used to obsessively talk about movies all of the time, just like we're doing now. But one of the things that I got really annoyed about, and it was so funny because it wasn't until the films came on home media in the early 2000s, when they came on DVD, that I felt vindicated about this, because there was no way to look it up at the time. But in Scream 2, I got totally pulled out of the movie, because I was sat there and I watch a lot of movies and Dewey appears, right? But I suddenly thought to myself, hold on a second. This music cue is from John Woo's Broken Arrow. And the guy, my friend said to me, no, you're wrong, Keith, because that was Hans Zimmer, and Marco Beltrami does the music for the Scream franchise. Look, it says it on the poster. And we got into this big argument because I said, well, I don't care what you say, but that
you're right.
is from Broken Arrow, because I saw Broken Arrow last year, and I really liked it. I kind of like those sort of John Woo American movies with John Travolta and Christian Bale and whatever. And I was like, no, that was definitely the theme that they played during it. So we got into this big argument about it, and there was no way to kind of verify it at the time. You couldn't just Google it. And if I kind of I'm making myself sound ancient, I know, but you couldn't back then, right? So, but apparently the story is that when they were temp tracking the film, they did use Hans Zimmer's theme called Brothers, which is from Broken Arrow, played by Dwayne Eddy. And the test screening liked it so much that rather than put Dewey's theme in the new score, they actually bought that track or that cue from Hans Zimmer to use in thing. And what I did like is I don't know whether you noticed, but they bought that back in Scream 5, and that's not a spoiler, I don't think. But they did bring because they didn't use that music ever again. They didn't use it in the first film, and they didn't use it in the other films. But they did bring that back. Sorry, that's a really geeky thing, I know.
No, I'm. It's always been one of my favorite things about it. And you say, did you notice them bringing it back? I burst into tears when they brought it back. Frankly,
well, I'm gonna continue the geeky thing, because I think Al does make a very good point about them being high school seniors and them possibly just starting college. But I will point out that Scream 2 takes place in April of '97, so second semester of their freshman year, whereas the original Scream probably takes place in like the early part of their senior year of school. So that's the later half of '95. So it's like about a year and a half. So I guess contextually it's the last 2 years, but that actually does allow them to still be in their freshman year of college if they are in fact that. But which it does seem so.
Yeah. There's been loads of comments about this. I'll just skim through them because otherwise there's loads. So Stephen Bell said, Sydney seems pretty settled at college, actually. She's had time to make a new best friend.
And Stephen knows the Scream series better than possibly anybody.
He's also, Stab needs time to have been made, which is what I said, right? And Gail had to write her book and then have it adapted. No way that happened in just 1 year. 2 years basically makes perfect sense. So I'm just.
Also, if you really want to tear it apart, it's pretty outrageous that they made Stab as like a fun slasher movie based on real murders of teenagers.
Has that ever happened in real life?
I remember when the first 2 World Trade Center movies came out 5 years after 9/11, and people were like, "Oh, this is too soon. This shouldn't be happening." But it was like, okay, they're kind of respectful and we get it. But you would not make a fun slasher movie where you'd get everyone to dress up.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Apparently as well, IMDb did exist back in 97. So I apologize. I put it this way, I never had access to it at that stage.
Yeah, so, the dial-up would take you didn't have time to load the page though to get there, I think.
Oh, and also apparently 3 and 4 use Beltrami's theme. Yes, it's 3 and 4 use Beltrami's theme, so obviously they 2. But that's weird because that's a continuity thing, right? Why isn't Dewey's theme the same in all the films?
Costs money.
Yeah,
Hans Zimmer is not cheap to license. That's why.
Well, there is that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see whether I'm missing any other comments about. Anyway,
Coolfire Nude just brought that up about them making Slender Man, even though there was that Slender Man instances with the girls. Although I will say that the movie was not a recreation of the events of what happened. It was a fictional storyline. Like, could you imagine if they made him like a year after that happened? If they're just like, oh, here's a movie about these 2 girls killing their best friend because of Slender Man, like that. Would never happen.
And Stab's literally like word for word verbatim what happens. So
yes.
I mean, I think
somehow they knew exactly what happened and could recreate it. I don't know how they knew.
Well, the stuff from I thought that for a moment. This again. No, I think this is fine. The bits from the original Stab that are shown in the new Scream, they would know exactly what was said and exactly what happened in those bits. And I was like, that's quite cool actually, because those because
they have Gail's video, but the Casey Becker death scene, how they knew the details of what happened that night is a little bit questionable.
It was kind of. In the new one, that was kind of like 3rd level meta, wasn't it? Because they're watching the movie of the
careful
the recreation, and then they got Halloween in there as well. So
don't say any more though. I feel like that's quite like a
Well,
it's not like plot spoilery, but I remember seeing that and like the first viewing of this one and going, oh, I'm glad I didn't know that was going to be in it.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a cool instance that involves the watching of Stab.
Yeah. That's plenty.
There we go. So what about so Scream 2? Are we saying we thought it was decent then?
I'm not saying that. You can't get me.
I'll say that if you want.
I'll say that if you want. Talking about the opening scene, and once I get started talking about the opening scene,
the opening scene makes no sense, does it? Yeah, I mean the opening scene. I've never been to a cinema where anybody behaves like that. So,
have you not seen The Room at the Prince Charles?
Well, but again, I kind of point this out in my video. The Room is a movie that most people have seen before, and there's that expectations of that. In this movie, it is a premiere. It is something they have never seen before. No one has any idea what's going on. I can see people like screaming when something scary happens, but I mean, man, I'll
challenge you on it a little bit in that I could buy it if someone, especially thinking back to 97, you've got like, this is the way that you're going to go out and see movies. It's a college town, so most of the people there are like, they are inviting students. So it's like, they're all going to be 19, 20 years old, and they are hyping it up by giving out, like, by making this whole thing. So the way I always viewed it was like the beginning is almost an indictment of when the culture is so insensitive to something that's really happened. So going on what I've just said, really, is like, to me, it was always, this thing really happened the next day over, and yet we're going to make entertainment out of it because there's money in it. And that's why I kind of loved the opening of that, because it's like, God, this is really appalling. And that you could see people doing that.
The rowdiness of the crowd is my least concern with the opening scene of that movie.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the knowing which cubicle the guy was going to go in and where to sit afterwards and all that, wasn't it?
Yeah, every single thing had to fall exactly into place for that killer's plan to have worked and for that to have been a success. And there's no possible way that he could have known that. I'm just going to call him Link because it's the only thing I could think of him. Why can't Omar Epps? There's no way he could have known that he would have been at that stall. There's no way he couldn't have planned for that. There's no way he could have planned that he would have put his head up to the stall. There's no way he could have known where his head would be against that stall for him to put the knife through it. I mean, come on. And then, like, him finding the girlfriend in the theater, like, just that alone, and being able to sit next to her and her not notice. I mean, she probably wouldn't have noticed him. I'll give it that. But just like the chances that a person screaming while being stabbed, like that no one would have been like, hey, what's going on there? It just,
yeah. Calvin Allen has put, it would have been better if Omar and Jada were just random killings. But,
by like 10%. Because again, like, if they were just random killings, it would have improved it based upon the fact that, like, when he was in the stall, it wouldn't have mattered who was next to him, I guess. But the fact that he was targeting them and knew that they were going to get up and go, and knew that he was going he had to know that guy was going to the bathroom ahead of time, because he was already in the stall. Like, what was he going to do? Just sit in that stall the whole movie?
Robert's put, he was watching over the stall wall. Don't ask how I know you can do that. And Cool Fire New put, maybe they had reserved seats in the movie, Josh. So
somebody brought that up in my video, and I will point out that, first of all, if you look at that theater, ain't nobody's got reserved seats there. Second of all, in the 90s, at that particular point in time, I do recall pretty vividly that reserved seating at movie theaters was still kind of a rarity.
But it is a premiere.
It was around,
which they sent tickets out specifically. I could buy it. I could explain each and every one.
I can get it again. Them having to reserve seats and him knowing where she was is again one of my smaller complaints about that, because it's not just that scene. I have huge issues with the Randy scene as well too, of just how. Again, it's just that the people in the movie are only dead because of the circumstances allow the person to be in the exact worst spot at the exact worst time. You've got the Randy scene. You've got a character who's standing in a completely wide open field, and he knows that there's a killer somewhere out there. I mean, it's a huge quad. It's huge. There's so many places to be. And for him to, like, walking around and going around through, and then for him to just happen to end up standing with his back to the exact van that the killer was in it's just dumb.
Movie can be yeah. Now, Robert's also put, okay, I wasn't expecting you to make that. By the way, you guys,
we all know what you are up to now, Robert.
Thank you so much. I'm getting to as many of them as I can, but there's actually quite a lot coming in. And what I'm trying not to do is, if they take us off track of what we're actually talking about, I'm sort of skimming a few of them. So, but I really appreciate it, guys. Keep coming back with comments. I do thoroughly appreciate the fact everybody's getting involved. So thank you. Okay, so Scream 2 then. You're on board with it, Al, but you've got your issues with it, Josh.
Well, yeah, I think when we go back to that nostalgia chat we had earlier, like it's funny because Scream. So I would go and visit my cousins most years when we could in North Carolina, and like the exact same thing happened the next summer. They were like, Scream 2's come out, so it was like, oh, we're going to rent that, and it became like a family thing. And so I immediately just loved it because it was more. But I completely get like it. I almost feel like with Scream 2, it has by nowhere near as it is this bad, but it has a bit of the Halloween 5 problem where they went, successful, quick, get another one out. And I think if they'd have just given Kevin Williamson like 6 more months, they probably would have ironed out some of the problems that Josh has and some other things with it, where they would just been like,
they were
hang on,
filming
does that
without
make
a script.
sense? Yeah,
They were filming without a script.
Yeah,
and then didn't they leaked the script? Someone that again, early days of the internet, the script got leaked, and then they had to go back and change stuff because people on the internet already knew what the ending was, and that was like one of the first major instances of that. So yeah, there's a great clip somewhere online of, I think it's in the Still Screaming documentary, where Wes Craven talks about that happening, and he's just like, you think you're funny, fuckers, but you're not. And he's just like, he's still so angry about it.
Well, I mean, in my home media review, I do talk about that. There have been a couple of, like there often is with horror films, there's been some really excellent feature-length documentaries made independently, but unfortunately they're not kind of on the home media versions, which is kind of annoying. But
Still Screaming's like a feature doc outside of. It's kind of independent, but it's good if you can find it. Robert's asking where in NC, so I'm just going to say it's in Raleigh, just near Raleigh anyway. So.
Oh, okay, North Carolina, where you used to go when you were a kid. Yeah. No, that's cool. So that's how we feel about Scream 2 then. I kind of agree with. I find it enjoyable and entertaining and whatever.
I do still enjoy it.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree with your criticisms, Josh, because if you're looking at it as something that's supposed to be coherent and make actual sense, then
it is a lot worse though.
It is my favorite of the Scream sequels. I will say that it's my favorite of the Scream sequels.
Okay, well on that point then, so obviously we had it was Heather Graham, wasn't it, playing within Stab, right? Playing the Drew Barrymore character in Stab, but then obviously we get Scream 3, which we get more of this movie within the movie type thing. And here's a question, and this one I know Josh is going to have thoughts about this. So, does Scream take place in the Ascu universe from Kevin Smith then?
I actually, this was actually part of my unanswered questions video, and
okay.
and I have determined that it is not possible for it to take place in the Ascu universe, mainly just because first of all, in the Ascu universe, in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, they are on the set of a Scream sequel directed by Wes Craven. Which doesn't really make sense. It doesn't all jibe up there. Plus, there are Scream posters up in the movie. Like there's different things in there. I do like. I really wish I knew who the commenter was that credited this. But their comment was that their comment was, it was on the Scream thing. They said that they always viewed it as Jay and Silent Bob were on the set and everything like that, and they were in the View Askew universe. They were on the movie set and they were on the Scream set and everything like that. And Wes Craven really liked them, so he put them into the actual Scream movie. So it's a double meta. Like you're actually seeing Jay and Silent Bob playing Jay and Silent Bob. So it's like in the Askew universe. So
I love it.
That was
but also in the same line of tourists, Wes Craven is behind them.
Oh,
in that line of tourists.
Right. And so in other words, then the janitor from the first movie is behind them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But not wearing his Freddy Krueger.
Well, he's sharpened up a bit. He's taken a trip. Yeah, yeah.
I will say, I'll just start this ball rolling, that I despise Scream 3.
Okay.
That I hate it.
And from Al's facial reaction there, you've got a different thought. Before you give that though, just your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete has put, my biggest issues with Scream 3 are with Roman, who we can spoil these ones, who is obviously the killer, the filmmaker killer, right? And the BS voice changer with the bulletproof vest and stuff. Yeah, I agree. That was all a bit. And on the subject of voice, I forgot to credit earlier that, of course, Ghostface, even though physically has been played by a number of actors and stuntmen and whatever over the years, but the voice has always been done by Roger Jackson, which I'm not sure if I'm right about this, but I believe, as a trivia thing, that was originally intended to just be a temporary voice.
Yeah,
is that right? I got that right. And then
I think they hired him for the Drew Barrymore scene, and they put him off set with a real phone. She never met him, and he was so good at it. They were just like, "Oh, this is the guy." Then I think that they weren't sure. I think because you shoot a film with someone on the phone, it's often not the person that's going to be the person on the phone, and that will be re-recorded when they've worked out who that's going to be. But I think he just absolutely nailed it. He's also in SpongeBob SquarePants, so that's another bit of trivia for
quite the career. All sorts of genres.
Yeah.
So Al, I'm feeling like you're a fan of Scream 3.
Well, look, cards on the table. I love the franchise, and as I think we established in Halloween Kills, the episode of that, I am very forgiving of, when I'm into a franchise, I'm pretty forgiving of whatever comes along with it. Having said that, Scream 3 is definitely my least favorite. I think it's hard to find someone that doesn't feel that way about this franchise. But I feel like I get why it took the turn it did, and there's a whole history story about Columbine being part of the reason, and young people killing each other is just let's make it funny. But I think some of the strangest things about the decision to kind of go more comedic and more outwardly kind of camp and silly made really odd choices that didn't need to be made. One of them being like the Gail's character in Scream 3. It's almost like Courtney Cox forgot how to play the character and played it really different, because she doesn't, like in all the other four, she plays Gail Weathers. She had the character changes over time, of course, as people do, but like you can see how she becomes Gail then into skip 3, 4 and 5. In 3, she's like, who is this person? She's so bizarre and sort of like, she's doing this constant thing with her head. I mean, the bangs.
Well, she's got those bangs.
Yeah.
It's like she's got those bangs. It's like a robot character.
Yeah, it's just it's really odd, and you're like, but that's what I don't get is how do you, a performer like that who goes, well, I built this character with this director. It's the same director. It's not about the dialogue, and that's always surprised me about 3. Every time I watch it, I'm like, what odd choices in performance here. Like, why is she being like that? And then, there's a lot of things like, we've had a mention of the voice changer. That is a real step too far. It's like, this technology doesn't exist. That's just, I mean, we can accept the original voice changer as like a thing that could distort your voice a little bit. I mean, that's very difficult to completely disguise it as someone else. But, we can take a leap of faith. The idea that you could just go, this is a perfect representation of anyone I want to speak to, with no sort of like, the only comment on that is, they've got our voices, they've got all of us. You're like, what? No, they haven't. How's that happening?
Yeah.
But having said that,
if it had been set today, it would almost be more believable, because today there are really scary AI apps and everything. That
deep fakes and potentially
this sort of stuff. But
yes,
in 2011, Sorry, no,
Well, no, that's
2000.
2000. Yeah.
Sorry, 2000. That wasn't the case. Yeah.
Bit of a leap. Although, all right, but to give the positives, what I really love about 3 is that they do this whole thing about, well, it's all like one of my favorite scenes actually is the little video of Randy saying these are the rules of a trilogy. You may have found yourself in a trilogy, and I love that whole bit because I'm like, yeah, that is the rules of a trilogy, and now you're going to show us them and then do them all, and we're still. To me, I remember at the time I was still like, oh, but that's still surprising because you told us what the rules of the trilogy are. You've sort of this twisted backstory that things you thought were true that then turn out not to be true. The long lost brother thing. It's a little bit soap opera, sure, but I was like, you've showed us that's what you're going to do, and now you've done it. And I was like, yeah, good for you. I liked the referential thing of that.
Yeah. Stephen Bell was put.
Oh no!
Scream is definitely going to use deep fakes, and
annoyingly, I think he's right, and that's going to be really annoying.
Yeah, no, Scream 3 was, I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't. I mean, I liked what you had to say, Josh, in your video, because I'm sure all three of us are filmmakers, so I'm sure that this is an even different meta level for us, right? But
it's like. Well,
I'll let you say it. Sorry.
Roman's the worst possible slasher villain in all of, because not only is he murdering people, like the wrong people. I mean, he's basically like blaming his mom for getting raped. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, it's such a horrible plot thread to follow of him like taking this out on her and getting her killed. I mean, that whole line is just all super questionable. But beyond that, the fact that you've got this guy that somehow manages to end up in Hollywood and end up with a successful career enough to the point that he's directing the latest entry of a very popular horror movie series. Like, that's how big his career has gotten. And how did he end up manipulating it to the point that he was able to just coincidentally end up as the director of a series of films that he's directly involved with? Like, the chances of that happening are like billions to one. Billions to one. And then just the fact, like, I'm sorry, if I ever got to the point where I'm like trying to murder somebody and part of my plan involves becoming a very successful Hollywood director, and I get to that point and I say, oh, hey, I'm directing a big Hollywood movie, and I'm going to just maybe take those murder plans and set them aside for right now. Set them aside because this is going pretty well. I'm going to stick with this.
Yeah. Also, isn't there something a bit kind of like, because of history, kind of a bit ironically disturbing about some of what happens in this as well? Because obviously these films back then were produced by the Weinsteins, weren't they?
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I think wasn't there something to do with actresses getting? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the ultimate villain is the producer who's like been raping actresses, and you're like, yeah, the fact that they're sitting there. I mean, that's a meta too far, I think.
A post-meta.
But think about that, the contextualization of that, because you have Lance Henriksen, who is Harvey Weinstein. He is the producer that's taking advantage of and abusing his actresses. And ultimately in the film, he's not really the bad guy. Like, they don't treat him like a villain. Like, they do kind of like treat him kind of crappy a little bit later on, blah, blah, blah. And, oh, he's such a sleazy jerk and he deserves to die. But, like, I'm sorry, but he is who the movie should have been like, this guy's the ultimate sleazeball creep. He's your villain. And he's kind of not. It's a little bit slide aside.
Oh, cool. I mean, I don't want to go too much down this path for obvious reasons, because this is supposed to be a positive and a fun channel, but cool fire new. I think it's actually, Josh, the psycho dude getting ahead in the movie industry based on past sexual deviance is the most believable thing for me. And I think sadly,
can't argue with that.
kind of true. Looking at obviously we're looking at this retrospectively, of course, but Yeah.
No, I think there's a lot of issues with 3, but weirdly, I think Kevin Williamson's time is the downfall of 3 and the problems with 2. Yeah. He didn't have enough time to do 2 properly, and he didn't have any time to do 3, and it shows, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, and Aaron Kruger has written some fairly decent films, but I just think it just went just bizarre.
Yeah. Kelvin's put again about the Roman character. He's barely there, then he's the killer. Yeah. It's I mean, in terms of the logic lining up in this is probably even worse, right, than part 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And not to mention, like you said, him getting his movie, because we're all filmmakers and we all know how hard it is to get into this business. So yes.
Quick sidebar: Robert Raglan mentioned Looker, and he won the chat in my eyes, because anytime anybody brings up the movie Looker, I'm a happy person.
Wow, yeah.
If you haven't seen Looker, go watch Looker, everybody.
Yeah, there are there's quite a lot of comments, some of which, and a lot of them are about. There was another Wes Craven film that was recommended as well, and I can't find it now. But
Deadly Friend.
Deadly Friend, yes. Somebody in the chat, I can't remember who put that, but they were saying that's obviously a very, very rarely mentioned part of his filmography, which is indeed very, very good. Yeah. Okay, so that was Scream 3, but then those all came out. The trilogy, basically the thing you can get as a trilogy on home media, because again, I go into it in my review, but there's a lot of rights issues for physical media as to why you can't just buy the collection, as it were. But the trilogy, that all came out between 96 and 2000, those 3 films. But then we have, just as we've had now, an 11-year gap. We had an 11-year gap then, didn't we? Because 2011, we got Scream 4. So
can I just touching on the trilogy and the way it's interesting that, because Josh mentioned earlier about kind of the late 90s slasher boom as well, and it's interesting that kind of Scream started it, and then...
Sorry. Yeah.
You okay? Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was going to bring up...
We've lost Keith. Oh, my God.
No, I was going to bring up a picture of the trilogy, and then I realised I haven't got that ready, so sorry. Yeah.
No, but yeah, we kind of talked about Scream launching this big slasher boom, and it really didn't take very long for it to just kill itself, because it was so... mad. But by 2000 it's pretty much over, and it sort of closes almost with Scream 3. There's a couple that linger on after that and stuff, but it's interesting how it almost was the closing film of that little time frame of these slashers, and it was the one that didn't really live up to the originals in a way. So you can see why it took a while for it to come back, certainly. After that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it had a fair gap then, an 11-year gap, and I think again in the story they're saying it's been 10 years, right, Josh?
There's although the new Scream movie does correct my timeline slightly, so I would have to do a update there, because the new movie does say that the last killings were in 2011. So it's a little bit more than 10 years. But looking at my notes, the whole 10 years thing came from Dewey and Gail's 10-year wedding anniversary. So I just assumed that they waited a little bit longer to get married. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think again, something about this film that looked quite interesting watching it now is you had the whole kind of idea of recording everything. You know, you had the 2 film enthusiasts, with a camera kind of capturing and recording everything. And again, I sort of think to myself that's quite interesting, because that's kind of what everybody does now, right? But I don't know, was it 2011? It was.
I feel like it was a little bit ahead of its time, which was probably a good thing in a lot of ways, because I feel like Kevin Williamson could see that as. He's always been like, everything he's done, even with Dawson's Creek and everything like that, he's always been on like that cusp of teen culture, I think, and like pointing these things out. But in a way, I think it almost the fact that it was probably about 4 years ahead of it being normal meant, I think, audiences didn't respond potentially to that part of it, being like, well, this isn't what kids are like, and it's like now they really are.
Well,
it
I
feel like the internet generation film, doesn't it? This one.
Well, I think that, like, you know what, I feel like that might be because of the fact that it's not as much of a point of that movie as I would have liked, because up until that point it was more along the lines of what every Scream movie is oh, the killer is trying to make a movie and he's trying to follow these movie rules, and then in the last like 15 minutes they give you the whole we're going to be internet famous thing, which wasn't really talked about up until that point. So for them to kind of like bring it in at the ending, it didn't feel like a theme of the movie. It didn't feel like a theme of what he'd been watching before. I thought it was a fine motivation. I thought that was actually one of the better parts of Scream 4, because like I said earlier with Scream, with the Scream movies, I don't feel with that 10-year gap between 3 and 4 that 4 switched up the game enough. It just gave me what I had already seen, and then in the last 10 minutes it gave me a pretty fresh and interesting motivation, but it wasn't an underlying context that the movie had given me up to that point. So it didn't quite nail it home for me. And I think that if the movie had been more about that instead of the movie reproduction stuff, and you had seen more of the social media thing, like it blowing up, like people talking about it online and whatever, oh, who is this killer? And if it had been more of running commentary throughout the film, but at the ending when they're talking about being famous on the internet and we're going to be internet famous and this and that, but you hadn't seen that so far, so it didn't hit like I wanted it to.
I completely agree. I think that, again, that's probably what Kevin Williamson probably had an idea that, like, oh, I feel like this is what kids are starting to want all the time. They just want to be famous. They want whatever it is. They need to be famous. So that was in there as like, it's almost like that went in there first, but then it wasn't enough to kind of, I think because it hadn't quite really happened in real life to actually examine what that's actually like. And you're right. Yeah. If Jill's character had even like there'd been a hint of she was interested in that stuff, it would have felt a bit more like, oh yeah, that makes sense now. When you watch, when you do a rewatch, you're like, yeah, of course she was kind of, but she's not really involved in that stuff,
Or even if side characters were talking about the impact that was happening, like in the social media, like if people were talking about like, oh, this is blowing up, or oh, did you see that video? Someone's sharing that video, like if that context had been there before.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I actually enjoyed it. In fact, weirdly, I couldn't remember this film at all until I watched it, within the last couple of weeks prior to seeing the new film. And, I actually wondered for a minute, I was like, did I see this when it came out? It obviously hadn't made that impact like the original trilogy had, but one of the things I don't sort of mind that they do in Scream, which they do in a lot of other franchises, and I always think it's a ridiculous coincidence, is when you have characters related to one another or crossing paths and stuff, and you just sort of think, how small is this world that they live in, whereas at least because we're sort of confined to Woodsboro in this, it's a little bit more. I can sort of buy that they have family, that even though Sydney moved away, some of her extended family wouldn't necessarily leave Woodsboro, and I kind of thought that sort of thing made sense. Do you know what I mean? But,
I like that.
But again, a lot of twists and turns in this one in terms of the who ended up doing it. And Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete has said, Scream 4, Emma Roberts is 5'2" and Rory Culkin is 5'6", but they made the killer 6 foot tall and way too strong. Don't think either of them can throw a body over a roof to the street below that far.
Yeah.
But maybe two of them together with lifts. Who knows?
Maybe one standing on the
Big
shoulders.
boots, man.
when you rewatch this one and you know who the killers are, there I will say that there's only like 1 or 2 points in the movie where I felt like it was a thing, where it was kind of like, oh well, there's no way that like either both of those people are very dainty. There's no way that could have happened. And that scene of somebody being tossed off of a roof was a little bit like, would they be able to do that? And then the killing of the 2 cops felt a little bit too like the killer seems a little bit OP in that essence there. But for the most part, it's not that egregious. It wasn't that.
I don't know how you would really solve that. Just considering like I always feel like you have to take a little leap of faith there and just be like, look, the killer needs to be of some sort of stature that is imposing, and if you try to make it like really realistic based on who it's going to be, you're gonna give away who it is if it's gonna be someone short like that, and second of all, it's like, well, that's gonna take away from any of the kill scenes from an entertainment factor. I always just feel like it's kind of a good point, but at the same time, it's like you've got to allow a little disbelief in some of this stuff, and that's where I would allow it there.
I agree. Kelvin Allen has put another comment here, which I think is quite relevant, that the scary movie definitely helped deflate the Scream franchise's scariness. And I always found I always found Scary Movie bizarre anyway. I know it's a farce and you know and whatever, but it's a farce of a parody. So in some respects, right? It's like
and I also think, like you said, Keith, like you almost forgot that you'd seen Scream 4. I think that kind of led over this. People genuinely in the first decade of the 2000s, I think, were almost confused over which one was which sometimes. Like, if they hadn't grown up watching this, they were like, oh, which one's the one that's like really funny and which one's the one that's sort of funny? And so it kind of, it deadened both of them in a weird way. Like, if you just loved the spoof thing, then that was good. And if you loved the horror thing, but it was almost like they got conflated with each other. And so that by the time 4 came out, I actually had a really great but also depressing experience going to see Scream 4 the morning it came out, first screening of the day. So it was like 10:30 in the morning, and I was the only one in the screen. And I was like, surely there's one other person that cares as much as I do. But I was the only one there, and at 10 minutes in, the projectionist walked into the screen with a torch to see if anyone had bothered to show up because he was about to turn it off. And I was like, oh, man.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm wondering, because I do find this sort of thing about release and when stuff comes out interesting. I'm wondering whether that one sort of fell between the gap in the generations.
I think, do you know what? We had 3 or 4 years leading up to and then after it of every single classic slasher was being remade. From like 2006 onwards, there were just like 50 remakes of all the slashers most people had never even seen. They was like, yeah, let's remake that. And then right in the middle of that, they went, oh, it's time to do another Scream. And it didn't seem to be like marketed particularly well. It didn't fit the remakes thing with Michael Bay's horrible remakes of all these films. It didn't fit in with that, but it didn't fit in with like, there wasn't really a market for franchise sequels at the time. Because even Halloween at this point going through remakes, it just had 2 remakes and then it was kind of dead for a while. And so you're just like, I just think it was mad timing where I think Dimension probably thought, if anything's going to cut through and be a proper, classic sequel rather than another remake, it'll be the Scream franchise. And I think people were just like, nah, I don't care about that.
Yeah, because I guess
it's a shame.
The Rob Zombie Halloween time, was it? Was it somewhere around
that was 07, 09, and then then the 09 one sort of killed Halloween for a long time. And so it was just like that. Yeah,
it's also the fact that the movie just, much like Keith had said earlier, it's just not that memorable. Like, I mean, it was very well done. I thought it was actually, in terms of like the logic of the movie, it's probably the one that makes the most sense after the first one. But But I mean, I saw it on opening night with my wife, and it was a pretty crowded. It was a pretty crowded theater. Like, so I had the opposite experience of you, Al. We saw it with a full house, and I distinctly remember walking out of it and just being like, "So what did you think?" And both of us just being like, "Yeah, it was okay." Like but it doesn't. It was what I said earlier, where it didn't really give you anything that was that unique or different or stand out.
Sure.
So it didn't. It wasn't just like, oh man, that really switched up the game a little bit. You just felt like you'd seen another Scream movie, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
Just another Scream movie.
I also think on that point as well that especially with horror movies, the audience participation does make a difference to your viewing experience. Like I the same as you, Al. I've seen a lot of movies where it's literally just me in the movie theater, which, with the behavior of some audiences, I'm actually quite welcome the fact. But likewise, like when I went to see this latest one, it was a packed cinema. It was a full house because it was on the opening. In fact, it wasn't the opening day. It was like the day after or something. But it was packed, and there was a really good vibe. And I do enjoy, particularly a horror movie or a comedy. If you've got an audience that are really, invested in what's on there, then that can be a great experience, I think. And it can definitely, affect your view of the film, I think, sometimes, whether it was pleasing or not. Sorry,
and I can say this from a lot of experience that I can recommend highly, that if you can go see a horror movie in a mostly Black neighborhood, I highly recommend that, because it will be the most into it crowd that you have ever experienced. Because for a long time I lived in Pittsburgh. I lived in a mostly Black neighborhood, and we'd go to the local movie theater, and it was, I'm like one of like 4 white guys in the theater, and oh my God, everyone was so excited. I mean, it wasn't quite like the movie theater in Scream 2. It wasn't like that.
Thank God.
But, I mean, when like scary stuff happened, people were excited, and like people were like, everyone was talking to the screen, everything. It just made it so much more fun. So if you could ever have that experience for a horror film, I highly recommend it. Very, very good stuff.
Excellent. Tad has actually put in the comments, for me, I thought Randy, who admitted to having a big crush on Sydney and a crazy obsession with horror and slasher movies, could have been involved, but they killed him off. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody was sad because it was the second movie, wasn't it, that Randy went, and then he obviously has a video cameo in the third. But yeah, that could have been an interesting twist for sure on it.
Yeah. I don't think we'd have put up with Randy being the killer though. He was too loved.
Yeah,
that would have been awful. Couldn't have coped with it. But yeah, 4's really interesting because I genuinely love it, but it just doesn't feel. It felt like it just got sort of missed. And exactly as you said, Keith, it's like people will go. In fact, a good friend of mine, during the real strict lockdown, we started. We'd watch like a horror movie every night together over WhatsApp, and we've watched we're still kind of doing it even now, and we've watched about 200 together, and we just like text each other play, and then we kind of watch it together but apart, And it was funny because we did like little seasons, and we did the Scream franchise fairly early on in that. And when it came to Scream 4, he said, "I've never seen this one. I didn't know there was a 4th." And I was like, "Mate, we watched it together." It's like, oh shit, yeah. So he'd been like, "Did we?"
And a lot of people miss it simply because it's trilogy. It's not in the. There is in the US. You can. No, actually, you can't get it even in the US, because the 5-movie collection in the US includes the 2 documentaries and the trilogy. Right. So you can't get it. Yeah. Anchor Bay own the rights to it for home video. So you have to. I
think also they did struggle a little bit potentially because like I said, Randy does the cameo thing about it being the rules of a trilogy, and Scream 3, for all its faults, ends in quite a neat, wrapped up, this was a 3-film deal kind of way. So it does the first 3, even though 3 feels completely off tone wise, it does feel like a trilogy story, the first 3. And so I think 4 suddenly feels like, oh, what, we're going to that this isn't part of the trilogy. And I believe at the time they were talking about if 4 had done really well financially, there was thoughts of a 5 and 6 and it being a new trilogy. And then obviously we lost Wes, and also I think it just didn't make the kind of money that they needed it to, which is why we got the TV series instead, I think. But
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, I've just realised that quote I put up is in reference to a previous one. So Cool Fire Newt put, I love Scream 4, but felt it needed a little more atmosphere, but heads and tails above 3. And to that, your friendly neighbourhood Uncle Pete has said Scream 4 was better than Scream 3. I just didn't like that they made Sydney's cousin, who she was close to, the killer. Would have liked it better if the cousin didn't know about. All fair points.
I've got to say that one of the greatest. I wouldn't have a ranking, but like if there were top 5 kills across the franchise, one of the best I think is in 4. One of the most like really gruesome that you don't expect. I can't remember her name now. It's all gone. But like the girl is across the street from them.
Olivia.
Oh yeah.
And then she's just like disemboweled when they get there. I'm like, oh my god, that it's really like. I mean, it's a Wes Craven staple to disembowel someone at some point, but it was like, it's a real moment when you cut to what's left of her on the bed, and you're like, whoa, I did not expect to see that shot. That is pretty gross. So yeah, that was good. Like.
I will say that's one of those scenes that drives me bananas, though, because I know I talked about this in my video, but it's something that actually carries over into Scream 5. And it's apparently how deaf the people are in the Scream universe. Because, since your 2 killers were there, they were both there. So the second killer was on screen. So the person talking on the phone had to be the person in the closet. And she's in the girl's closet, like literally 3 feet behind her. So, and was not the killer was talking in this kind of a voice, not like this kind of a voice. He was talking like this. So how did she not hear? Like in the real world, the scene would have been like the girl standing there being like, "Somebody in my who's talking in my closet," and like running out the door. And Scream 5 actually has at least 2 of those moments where. I don't understand why they did not hear the person
hearing trouble.
Phone one room over, because if somebody's in that room right now talking on the phone, I hear them. You know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I get it. Now that's cool. And then obviously, before we had this new film, in between, we had. I don't know whether you guys saw this or knew anything about this. We had a TV series which was an MTV TV series, which here in the UK the first 2 seasons of this are on Netflix, and I have to say, I mean, it only really used the title and premise and had no real connection other than that to the films. You had the same sort of archetypes as the characters, and you had a version of the slasher, which, as you can see from the picture there, had a totally different mask to Ghostface, and was voiced by someone else. But I don't know, did either, because I have to say I actually quite enjoyed this.
I have not seen any of it.
Did you guys see it? No?
Yeah, I've seen. So in season 3, they do bring back Ghostface and Roger Jackson as well.
Okay, no. Okay, you
3.
can answer something for me here then, because this is quite frustrating. I'd heard there was going to be a season 3, and they were going to turn it more into sort of an anthology series. So they were replacing the cast from the first 2 seasons, and obviously yes, they were going to go back to the Roger for the voice and the original mask design and stuff. But I cannot find that anywhere to watch.
It's very hard to find.
Physical media. It doesn't seem to be on any streaming platforms. You can't buy it on Amazon. So where the hell can you see this?
As embarrassed as I am to say, you have to steal it. So I would pay for it if I could, but I had to find it less legally, shall we say.
Right.
It's I don't even know. It was so delayed. So the first 2 are one kind of place and one kind of storyline, and then it kind of got cancelled, and then it got picked up by someone else. In fact, I think it got picked up by Mary J. Blige, if I remember rightly. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Weird. And so it's sort of like, and then they went, well, with the third, it'll be entirely new characters, an entirely new town, but we'll go back to the mask and the voice that people love so much, because I think that was the people didn't really like.
Well, apparently that was one of Wes Craven's comments as well, because he saw it because it was he died shortly before it got released, I think.
Yeah.
But he did get to see it and obviously have some sort of sign off on it. And apparently one of his comments was, you shouldn't have changed the mask.
I don't think they intended to originally. I think there was a licensing problem with it.
Yeah.
And then they went, well, in that case, let's lean into make it like sort of a bit like the mask. And as you can see on the screen, it's sort of a bit like it, but let's not try and pretend it's the same thing. And I think they did that quite well. I'll be honest, I think the first season was really good. I really enjoyed the first one. The second one was less watchable. There's still quite good moments in it. I think people could enjoy this, so I'm not going to say any spoilery stuff about it at all.
No.
And I think they're definitely worth a binge watch if you have like
yes.
a fairly free weekend.
Yes.
Do the first two seasons. Season 2. Oh, Cool Fire Newt just said I enjoyed the first and tuned out season 2. Same here. I found like I watched season 2 and about 2/3 through I was like, what's happening in this again? But just finished it anyway and was like, yeah, that was fine. And then I could see why it then got cancelled. And then 3, it was nice to see the mask and the voice back, but 3 is pretty appalling as a TV show. It's pretty bad to watch.
Okay. No, I actually I saw 1 and 2. Actually enjoyed it. As I said, the slashers voiced by Mike Vaughn in that. But I thought it was quite fun. And Josh, if you want to kind of fit it into continuity, I always look at it this way: is because it was taking place in a different town with no crossover characters and a different slasher, effectively. And I think they do reference something happened a few years back in another town or something. So they kind of loosely reference it. But you could kind of fit it in. But it was a little bit more serious than Scream. Totally. It was a little bit more of a sort of standard slasher teen drama than it was a like a sort of self-referencing.
I think it took on like it kind of really tried to take on sort of teenage angst stuff, which is like it reminded me a bit of shows like My So-Called Life, the first couple of seasons. So it was like My So-Called Life but with people getting murdered every so often. Like not all the time, they'd just be like, and there's been another murder. Having said that, there is, again, go back to like gruesome good deaths in these series. There is one in season 1 of that, which was just like a real show, especially for being a TV show, and how much more violent things are these days. But I was like, oh my God,
it was quite violent. You could tell it was like a streaming show. It was quite violent and it was quite diverse. I think that was one of the things. It was fairly progressive in terms of its characters, even though you essentially had these sort of archetypes from the Scream series. You know, they played around more with ethnicity and sexual orientation and stuff like that. So it was I thought it was quite good.
I think if you're interested in like completing this franchise, I definitely think it has a place. Like you don't need to watch it, as you said, Keith. They're not part of the Woodsboro universe, really. This is a different place. But I just feel like they're enjoyable. I'd almost go back and watch them again just to sort of remember some of it. But I did enjoy it, and I think if you haven't seen them, I would recommend, if you've got some time, just throw them on. You don't have to get too stuck in. You don't have to watch it too carefully, but they're good to have on, I think. And there's some good twists as well. I think there's good twists in them. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, I'm conscious that we are approaching the 2-hour mark. We haven't quite gone that long yet. But obviously, I want to make sure, without spoilers as such, but you guys have had a chance to talk about anything that you either really liked or didn't like about Scream 5. So I think we should sort of jump into that now, and before we sort of wrap things up. So
Go on,
Josh,
Josh, take it down.
yeah, come on.
I'm not going to take it too far down. I actually very much enjoyed the front half of this movie. I thought that the kill scenes were great. They brought back some nice tension. There was some really great moments. There was a great bit, even though it kind of knocked off Jason Goes to Hell, but there was a great bit with a character walking around and like holding doors open and closing them, and you thinking the killer's going to be there, and
yeah,
that was some good sequences, and I thought the mystery was handled pretty well. But there's a point in this movie where everything goes wrong, and it's when all I'll say to avoid any spoiling is that it all goes bad when they get to the house, and that's the entire final set piece is in a house, and I think everything that happens in that house just does not work for me in the tiniest bit. The reveal doesn't work. The motive doesn't work. How everything is set up doesn't work. The performances don't work. One of the things I commended on the first Scream is that when you watch Scream and it's revealed that Billy and Stu are the killers, they're playing the killer versions of them only slightly different than they have been playing their regular characters throughout the movie. They seem like the same people. But then in some of the other ones, when the killer is revealed, and this one is the same deal, it's like throughout the movie, they're this kind of character. This is how I'm talking to you now. This is who I am. And then, but I'm the killer now. So now I'm going to talk like this. I'm going to kill people. And it's too over the top for me. And it's so jarring because it just doesn't feel, takes you out of it, and it takes away the subtlety of that performance, and it doesn't feel like the same character anymore. So it's just kind of a cheat. I didn't like the involvement of the legacy characters as much. I'm happy they were there, but I wish they had been given a little more to do. That like them being there didn't ultimately impact the storyline as much as I would have liked. But it was fine. I'm not mad at it. I just wanted more from it. I mean, it's just another Scream movie, to be honest. It doesn't really do anything that the other ones didn't do. So if you're looking for a fresh take on the franchise, you're not going to get it.
Okay. Before I come to you, Al, just I don't know whether he's already gone, but Robert Ragland has put signing off early. Thanks for a great discussion, and thank you, Robert, for getting involved in the chat. Also, Calvin Allen has put up, I like Scream 5 more than I thought I would, which that's cool. So Al, come on, give it to us.
I've spent all day trying to think of anything that I didn't like about it, and I just can't. So I'm not going to. Why don't we just allow that? So especially with no spoilers as well. There's a couple of things that I thought I might say if we were going to spoil it, and I'm not going to say those now because I think it's too dangerous. But I just really enjoyed everything about it. Even though I get where you're coming from, Josh, I'm okay with that. I was fine. I was there for like I'm back in this world. I'm back with some of these characters again. I cried like 5 times, which I was surprised about. I was like really emotional from the film. I think partly because I was just so excited to be there as well. I thought the kind of the new characters were really good. They were sort of like taking the archetypes that we know and just updating them a bit, but kind of like using them as red herrings and throwing us off a little bit. I loved a lot of the kind of the self-referential stuff was on a par with what they were doing in the original. A lot of the really kind of meta stuff, because meta can be really irritating. We've established that, but I think some of the stuff they did in this one was like, oh, that was on a par with what they did in the original, but it's kind of in 2022, which felt like that was.
And I think the fact that they kind of reference that it can be irritating.
Yes, Yeah.
Tad has put, I'm off for a bit later. All I just wanted
See
to,
you,
you know.
Tad.
Stephen Bell has put, I think if you're a fan of the series, you enjoy it. It's a solid Scream sequel, and I definitely agree with that comment. I had a lot of fun watching this. Maybe when it comes out on physical media, home media, maybe we can come back and do a spoiler discussion around it as a sort of sequel to this, if you like, you know.
A requel,
because that's the rules. But no, I liked it. I liked the commentary on you know, toxic fandom and legacy sequels, and you know, all of that sort of stuff works. I also like, this is not a spoiler, but I like the fact, as we well know, Halloween, because John Carpenter was such a big fan of Psycho, they named, you know, the character Loomis, you know, Donald Pleasant's character Loomis. Of course, the Scream franchise played on that with Billy Loomis and Mrs. Loomis in the first two films. And what I like with this is the sort of lead character, because I think the cast, they've been in a few things. You know, you've got Jack Quaid in there. You've got Jenna, who's been in The Boys and whatever. You've got Jenna Ortega, who's been in that series You and whatever. But Melissa Barrera, her character's called Sam Carpenter. I just kind of, I like those kind of little references. You know, I do love it when they do things with that. So but maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll you know, we won't be too feature length or long feature length now, and we'll come back and do a sequel.
I'll tell you a real quick thing that recall. Yeah, one of my favorite things about it was I think it's the best David Arquette performance I've ever seen.
Yes,
I think he's like, I mean, like, that is the character that everyone knows him for. He hasn't done that much else outside of it, but like, it was the absolute, this of everyone in it. I was like, this is exactly who Dewey would be at this point. This is so good. He absolutely nailed it, and I thought, like, if nothing else, he was so good at it, and I just loved it. Yeah.
Wait, are you saying that he's better in this than he was in that wrestling movie that he was in? I mean, come on.
He's even better in this than he was in that episode of Friends.
There you go.
There you go. Friendly neighborhood Uncle Peter said, great live stream. This was fun, so thank you. I appreciate that. Right, I want to give you guys the opportunity to promote your work. So, Josh, if more people want to find you, where can they do so, and any highlights you want to talk about?
Movie Timelines right here on YouTube. That's the best way to get me. 2 videos every week. Tomorrow there's a fun video going up that is Friday the 13th related. And I don't mind telling you, this Friday is definitely Scream related. This Friday you're getting Scream ripoffs.
Oh, right.
Great.
Oh,
Amazing.
Cool. I look forward to that. That's great. And you're also on Instagram at Movie Timelines. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's just Movie Timelines. Pretty easy to find. Pictures of me standing in front of houses.
There you go. Well, you know, once again, thank you for coming on, and that's been great. So, Al, tell us about Turtle Canyon Films, and you know what you've got going on, where people can find you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm terrible at bigging up stuff. Basically, a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is kind of in British TV currently, and not a lot I can share or talk about right now. But we also this is why I shared this. This was a short film I made a couple of years back, which is kind of a precursor to a feature which my company is developing at the moment. And it's kind of a very, very short kind of slasher vibe to it, which it felt like it was appropriate for this show. But basically we've done there's a lot of kind of shorts and stuff under Turtle Canyon. We also have a YouTube channel called Turtle Canyon Comedy, where we do an awful lot of kind of comedy content, sketches and live stand-up and all kinds of that sort of thing. We do an awful lot, basically, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly, but I think if you're into horror, there's 6 minutes of something scary there. It takes place in a school, so that's
cool.
Fun.
And people can find that at turtlecanyonfilms.com, right?
Yeah, I
And
think so. Yeah, it's on there.
Guardians.
There's a thing. Yeah, great.
All right, then we hope people will check that out. On the subject of slasher films and whatever, on my other channel, which is British Isles, that's EYLES, as in my last name, on YouTube, I've got a anthology series of short films that I've done called the Urban Chiller Tales. I'd love it if they got more views and people commented on them. So check that out. I think you can watch the whole lot within half an hour. So they're only short films, but all with a bit of a creepy vibe. So go and check those out. I'm also working on a feature at the moment as well called Car Cam, which, as the name suggests, it's a film that takes place entirely from a dash-mounted camera, because that's what you have to do when you've got no budget, right? And come up with ideas. Obviously, you're already on Home Media Minefield. If you're watching this, you can email the channel. We've got a Let's See What's Out There is the podcast version. So it's at LSWOT cast. Let's See What's Out There. That's short for. You can email us at lswotcast@gmail.com as well. And on the social media, I'm at Home Media Minefield if you want to check out more reviews, etc. On that subject, just some recent things and something coming soon on Home Media Minefield. So if you enjoyed listening to myself, Al, and Josh this evening, please do check out our previous live stream where we talked about the Halloween franchise, and in particular Halloween Kills. That can be found on this channel as well in the videos. So that would be fantastic. I also recently did do a full review looking at the picture, the audio, and the packaging and bonus content and special features on the Scream trilogy. But I also talk about Scream 4 as well in that. So if you want to find out where you can get it on social media, on physical media, watch that video there. And also this week, yesterday, I literally finished watching the 4K Ultra HD release of Halloween Kills, which has an extended cut of the film and some bonus material. And I will be putting out a video where I talk about, again, picture, audio, and bonus features and show off the packaging, etc. there. So that is coming up as well. So please do subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to get notifications of when we do these videos. Like, for example, if we do one on Scream 2022 sometime in the future.
Scream 5.
And check that out.
Cream.
Thank you to everybody that's not only watched this live, but that commented. I wasn't able to get to all the comments, but I think I got at least one comment from everyone that put a comment on there. If I didn't get to you, my apologies. I was just trying to keep us on track and sort of manage the comments at the same time. So it's a lot of plate spinning. But there you go. But no, I really do appreciate you guys watching this. Josh and Al, I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for helping make the show great. I really appreciate it. And check out their work as well. And I'm going to say goodbye for now. I'm not going to say I'll be right back, because we know that is wrong. We'll see you on the next Home Media Minefield presents Let's See What's Out There. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.